In 1992, 7 of Marvel's best-selling artists left the company to form a brand new one, Image Comics. Now, I've covered the formation of Image in plenty of detail in some of my other videos, and it's not super relevant to what we're talking about today. But what is important is that these 7 artists are some of the most influential comics creators of all time, both in terms of their work as well as how they turned the industry on its head by pushing creator-owned comics into the mainstream. Erik Larsen, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, Todd McFarlane, Whilce Portacio, Marc Silvestri, and Jim Valentino. Their individual talents are undeniable, inspiring countless imitators for better or worse, and selling multiple millions of issues. But which one is the best artist? That's the question we're going to be grappling with today. Hey heroes, I'm Josh from Panels to Pixels, and let's rank the founding fathers of Image Comics. Now, before we get started, I just want to establish a few ground rules. So, number 1, art is subjective, obviously. I shouldn't have to tell you that, but there's no such thing as the best art or the best artist. This is my list, and these are my personal opinions. And if your opinion is different, well, that's wonderful. Let me know in the comments below, but just don't be a jerk about it, okay? I only mention that up front because I know that some of my choices are gonna get a little spicy at times, so don't say I didn't warn you. And secondly, for the purposes of this video, I'm judging each artist purely on where they were in 1992, so year 1 of Image Comics. And as such, I'm gonna be taking into account their work at Marvel up to the point that they left to form Image, and just those launch titles, that first year of Image. Why, you ask? Well, because some of these artists have barely drawn a page of comics in 25 years, so judging them at the peak of their careers 30 years ago seems to be the fairest way. Alright, enough preamble, let's dive on in. Number 7, Jim Valentino. Now let me preface this by saying that I am a huge Jim Valentino fan, so the fact that he's at the bottom of the list is testament to how much respect I have for all of these artists. But somebody had to be at the bottom, and I'm sorry, Jim, it's gonna be you. At Marvel Comics, Jim Valentino made a name for himself with his revival of the Guardians of the Galaxy, which kicked off with Guardians of the Galaxy issue 1, cover dated June 1990. This was a good old-fashioned space romp that kind of stood apart from a lot of the grim and gritty stuff that the other rockstar artists at Marvel were doing at the time. Now, it's worth pointing out here that this is not the MCU version of the Guardians of the Galaxy that you might be familiar with. And at this point, the Guardians of the Galaxy were so beyond obscure. They weren't even C or D list, they were like properly Z-list characters. But somehow Jim Valentino managed to make the series enough of a success that it went on to run for 62 issues, even after he'd left the book. And I suppose the freedom that came with working on such an obscure title allowed Valentino to bring some indie cred to Marvel, and also be both writer and artist. He was really the first of the Image guys to be both writer and artist. Jim Valentino's first title under Image was Shadowhawk, which beyond just having chromy gimmick covers, is super overlooked in the canon of early Image titles in my opinion. To me, Jim Valentino straddles a line between the classic Silver and Bronze Age cartooning that was falling out of fashion by the 90s, and the new indie and manga influenced style that was emerging. Unlike most of the other Image guys, he favours a bold line, like very clean, with clean, soft faces on his characters. He's not rendering with a million little lines and crosshatches all over the place. His anatomy and his forms are kind of squat and bubbly in a way that I think comes off as amateurish to some people, but I think it's a reflection of Valentino's background in indie comics. Titles like Normal Man, which he produced in the 80s. Still, there's something about Valentino's work that, despite its cartoonish style and sensibilities, it just feels dangerous. It feels underground. Shadowhawk is brutal and bloody, and slightly juvenile, but that just makes it all the more menacing, I think. And what Valentino lacks in technical ability that maybe some of the other Image artists had, he more than makes up for it with style and atmosphere. In particular Shadowhawk, which has always reminded me of the original RoboCop. Not just because it's a guy in a shiny metallic suit, but there's like a self-awareness and sense of humour about the grim and grittiness that maybe some of the other Image titles lacked. If you take nothing else from this video, go and read some Shadowhawk. It's like Image's weird, low-budget, R-rated B-movie. It's really bonkers stuff. Number 6, Whilce Portacio. Whilce Portacio worked on quite a few different titles at Marvel prior to forming Image. One of his earliest assignments at the House of Ideas was inking over Art Adams on the Long Shot miniseries. And Longshot is like the Rosetta Stone of Image Comics. That feels like the blueprint for everything that came after, the 90s Image style. But Portacio was most known for The Punisher and working on some of the X books like X Factor and Uncanny X-Men. Although he was one of the 7 founders of Image in 1992, he sadly had to withdraw from the company not long after due to his sister's illness. But he did eventually publish his own title, Wet Works, through Jim Lee's imprint Wildstorm in 1994. Now, I'm going to be banging on about the manga influence in Image Comics a lot in this video, but it really can't be overstated. You see it in the exaggerated, elongated forms and the cartoony faces and the big, splashy page layouts that became such a hallmark of 90s comics that they now have a reputation as being kind of hard to read. Whilce Portacio's style is loose and fluid, it's hyper-detailed, but it still flows and feels organic. He goes for this fixed line width that can be quite delicate and ornate. And in that style, he renders with a lot of these long, unbroken lines that are really quite pretty, I think. It's almost like you can see his stream of consciousness on the page with these long, winding lines. He may not be the most accomplished or exciting storyteller, but there's a painterly quality that I really enjoy. And he was a key proponent in making that modern manga style the style of the 90s. Number 5, Jim Lee. Now, Lee's position on this list will undoubtedly raise a few eyebrows, and there's absolutely no denying that he is hugely prolific, and one of the most influential artists of all time, frankly, but especially of the 90s. Put it this way, there is comics art before Jim Lee and after Jim Lee, and for the rest of the 90s, every no-name artist was trying to do Jim Lee. If you can point to any artist as reflective of a Marvel house style in the early 1990s, it would be Jim Lee. And I'm sorry to say it, but that's exactly what I've never really liked about Jim Lee's work on titles like Punisher War Journal, X-Men, and later at Image, Wildcats. Oh boy, I can already hear the furious clacking of angry commenters' keyboards. Again, I want to point out that this is just my opinion, but for me, it lacks some of the raw energy of the other artists on this list. And as a result, it just leaves me a little cold. That being said, Lee's impact is undeniable, and I think that cleaner, more, dare I say, corporate style makes a lot of his Marvel work easier for modern readers to go back to. Jim Lee is the king of glossy, big-budget, blockbuster superhero comics, but I like my comics a bit more rough around the edges, that's all. Number 4, Rob Liefeld. So I just mentioned that Jim Lee's work lacked raw energy. Well, Rob Liefeld is 100% raw energy. He's got raw energy in spades. His energy is so raw, in fact, that it's probably not fit for human consumption. But that's exactly what I love about it. I once referred to Liefeld as the Kurt Cobain of comics. And to use another musical analogy, I'm a big fan of the band Kiss, right? This is a tangent, but just go with me on this one. There are 2 versions of Kiss. There's the band at their most successful, the biggest band in the world, squeezing out stodgy stadium rock for middle-aged concertgoers. And then there's Kiss in their infancy, around 1974-75, prior to any chart success, playing club gigs for manic teenagers. Raw, hungry, and vital. And that's exactly the same energy I get when I look at Rob Liefeld's work on New Mutants and later X-Force. Look, this is absolutely not an artist at the top of his game. I've never claimed that, and I don't think even he would claim that. But it's an artist who is hungry for success, and taking the biggest swings imaginable. As the youngest of the Image founders, Liefeld's rise to fame was truly meteoric. In fact, he'd only been producing work at Marvel for 3 years before launching the very first Image title in Youngblood issue 1, cover dated April 1992. I think both Liefeld and Youngblood have a reputation for being low quality, but there's something explosive and unfiltered about these pages. It was exciting in 1992, and somehow, against all odds, I think it's still exciting now. Number 3, Marc Silvestri. Now, Marc Silvestri is kind of the unsung hero of Image Comics, in my opinion. Not to say that he hasn't been incredibly successful with later Top Cow series like Witchblade and The Darkness. Those books have really dedicated followings. But I feel like Silvestri often gets left out of the conversation when names like Todd McFarlane, Rob Liefeld, and Jim Lee are being thrown around. And that's a huge oversight, in my opinion. Marc Silvestri's work combines the best elements of all the other Image guys. The technicality of Jim Lee, the fluidity of Whilce Portacio, the intensity of Rob Liefeld, and then he presents it in a package that just feels way more timeless than a lot of what was coming out during the 90s. First and foremost, Silvestri is a great illustrator, working in the tradition of legends like Jack Kirby, Bernie Wrightson, and John Buscema. His work on Uncanny X-Men and its spin-off title Wolverine from 1987 through to the formation of Image in 1992 really heralded in a new era of more dynamic, manga-inspired comic art. And all the while, he maintained a high level of storytelling and visual fidelity associated with the X-Men title, thanks to the pedigree of artists that had come before, like Dave Cockrum, John Byrne, and Paul Smith. At Image Comics, Silvestri debuted the title Cyberforce, which, while a little generic in concept, is an undeniably high-quality piece of work. In fact, it's possibly higher quality than anything else that Image put out in that first year. These are real, widescreen, high-octane comics that would feel just as fresh today as they did in 1992, in my opinion. Number 2, Erik Larsen. Erik Larsen's art is perhaps an acquired taste, but it's a taste that I've acquired over the years, and now I just can't get enough of it. One of the more cartoony artists in the Image stable, Larsen is a comics historian, and you can see everything from Golden Age artists like C.C. Beck to Jack Kirby to manga in his style. At Marvel, Erik Larsen had the unenviable task of taking over from Todd McFarlane on The Amazing Spider-Man, and then again on the adjectiveless Spider-Man title. But Larsen carved out a style that is uniquely his, which both recalled Steve Ditko's 60s Spider-Man while progressing the character further towards an even more bendy and athletic style. One of the defining features of Larsen's style is big, broad characters with angular features. He incorporates a lot of depth and dynamism into his figures by using a wide range of line weights, favouring a heavy brush line for defining shadows. Again, this is classic comic stuff, it's very Jack Kirby, and it's not necessarily what was all the rage in the 90s. Over at Image, Erik Larsen gave us Savage Dragon, which combined action-packed police drama with superhero bombast. Just like Cyberforce, those early issues of Savage Dragon are of a much higher quality than 90s Image comics get credit for, and have aged a lot better than most titles from the era. The series has aged so well, in fact, that it's still going strong today, with Larsen still writing and drawing every issue. How many other Image comics from the 90s have managed to maintain a readership for over 30 years? Well, just one, actually, and we're about to talk about its creator. Number 1, Todd McFarlane. One of the things that fascinates me most about Todd McFarlane is his status as an outsider artist. He was relatively late to the field of comics, only pursuing a career as an artist after sustaining a sports injury that dashed his dreams of becoming a professional baseball player. And by his own admission, he didn't read many comics once he was actually in the business. He didn't seem to be that interested in comics at all. But what he brought to the medium was an intensity and a rock star swagger that blew the spiderwebs out of the comics establishment. Although he first rose to prominence with a brief stint on DC's Batman, and then The Incredible Hulk with writer Peter David, it was on The Amazing Spider-Man that he became superstar artist Todd McFarlane. Over the course of 4 years, the Canadian artist transformed the title from traditional superhero romp to a neurotic noodle fest, full of huge action set pieces and page-breaking panel layouts. One McFarlaneism I absolutely adore is the long, skinny panel with the extreme close-up of a face. It's kind of stupid, but just maximum style points. He adopted a much more exaggerated, athletic physique for Peter Parker, more spider than man, and borrowed the sinewy trails of spaghetti webbing from artists like Michael Golden and Art Adams, but turned it all up to 11. There are few comics artists who can claim to have forever altered the way that people draw an A-list character like Spider-Man. But from that point on, the webbed wallcrawler's eyes got bigger and more bug-like, the webbing on his suit got tighter and more detailed, and crucially, his stories got darker. From there, Todd McFarlane went on to debut Spawn at Image Comics, further developing his gritty and grotesque style for at least the first 25 issues or so. And while his comics work has been overshadowed somewhat over the past 25 years by his inroads into the toy industry, his influence is irrefutable, and he remains a fan favourite artist to this day. Hey, thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, do me a favour by liking the video, and let me know in the comments below, who do you think is the best artist out of all of the Image guys? If you want to see more stuff like this, don't forget to subscribe to Panels to Pixels and give that bell icon a little ring-a-ding-ding so you never miss out on future uploads. As always, heroes, stay safe, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.